guys, how are we all doing today? Are you doing well? So yeah, my name's Grace. I live in Kunming, China. Some of you guys probably know me. Um, can everybody please type in their name, where you are where you are living currently, your name, where you're living, and your age, please, just so I get a sense of who we have today. So go ahead, just type it into the chat box there. And yeah, we'll get going. So yeah, let's see, we got a lot of comments coming in. Okay. Oh, we got Tony in Shanghai, Ivan, Will in Beijing, Antai from Hong Kong. Oh, 10 years old, Lanzhou. Ooh, Lanzhou, really good noodles in Lanzhou. And 11 years old, Shinran. Yeah, hi everybody. So yeah, anyone from Canada here today, or is it all just Chinese? Bruce from Wuxi? All just people in China. It's just like China. Ooh, we got one person from Canada. Hi, never been, big fan, want to go someday. Cool. All right. So again, like last week, this is a topic that some people have feelings about. Now, I don't know if you know much about this yet, but if not, hopefully by the end of this class, you'll have an idea about it. But in America right now, this is one of those like debated topics. So some people are like, oh my gosh, we need to get rid of the electoral college, and we need to do something, we need to do just something called a direct vote. And other people are like, well, wait, if we do that, then like that's gonna it's gonna go against what in our constitution, and it's going to create all these problems. And so about what those problems are with the current electoral college, and what the heck it even is, and why the heck we even have it, and why some people really don't like it, and why some people are like, it's the best thing in the world. We're gonna learn about it today. So I am not going to tell you how I personally feel about it, but I am going to give you some information about why it's a good thing and why it's a bad thing, okay? Because like everything in life, it's usually more complicated than good guys and bad guys. Usually there's stuff in between, and we have to learn to listen to each other and to respect one another. And even when we disagree, still be kind. So that's what I hope you guys get out of today. So without any further ado, we shall go to the pros and cons, the debate about the Electoral College by Sue Bradford Edwards. This is on Big Universe if you guys want it. So why is this important? The Electoral College is actually how the US chooses its current leader. We do have like voting, but the voting all ends up going into this thing called the Electoral College. What is that? We'll talk about it. Okay. And recently, a lot of people have been talking about getting rid of it. Other people have been like, no, we have to keep it forever. And then actually, some of the big protests that happened on January 6th, part of that actually had to do with some of the stuff going on in the Electoral College. People were trying to interrupt the Electoral College. And so actually, this is a really important thing for the US currently. So maybe you've seen some of the stuff in the news and you're like, what the heck is going on? Hopefully you'll have some ideas about what some of the things people are talking about are and fighting over. But we're not going to fight over it. We're just going to learn, right? Okay, so few ideas you need to know before we get into the thick of it, before we get into the broccoli in my throat, before we get into the book. Okay, the first thing you need to know is this idea of direct vote. Okay, now this is just like if I have 100 people and I say, okay, who likes the blue pen? Raise your hand. And 60 people, or 52 people raise their hand. I say, who likes a red pen? Raise your hand. And 48 people raise their hand for the red pen. Well, the blue pen would win. So that's an example of direct vote. Okay. Now, the US system, we do have a popular vote, but we don't actually do this vote for the blue pen. Oh, 52% voted for the blue pen wins. That's not quite how it works in the US. Because when we're talking about choosing leaders for a country, we're talking about a lot more people, now like over 300 million people. So it's hard to count like every single little vote. And then the other thing is we also have to consider ways to make sure that the people who like one leader don't necessarily end up beating up abusing their rights, abusing their ability to get someone elected. We want to make sure that they're not just going to be able to like, down blue pen people. We want to make sure actually at the end of the day that the people who like the red pen are a little bit happy, and the people who like the blue pen are happy too. So the Electoral College, though, is an attempt to make sure that the blue pen people, or the people who are the most popular, or the red pen people, if they're the most popular, that they're not just able to beat one another up and make, oh, I won this time, your life is miserable now, or I won this time, now I'm going to make your life miserable. Whoa, I broke my pen. So that's why we have the electoral college in part, okay? But a direct vote would just be like, blue pen wins, 52 votes. All right, another term you guys need to know, you probably know this one a little bit already, is democracy, okay? And this is just a selection or choosing a leader by voting, okay? And either that happens by individual people voting, like I can vote for my congressman, or I can actually, when I elect my congressman, when I elect my leader, now that leader can actually go and they represent me in the federal government, and we'll talk about what the heck federal government is. So I choose someone to help make the choices, because it'd be really hard if every time there was a the nation had to pass a law. It'd be really hard if every single law they were like, okay, well, let's go see what the 350 million people want. Can you imagine how long that would take? So we don't do it that way. We elect people to help make the decisions for us. Okay. One other term that you need to know is federalism. Okay. And so federalism is just when you have a division of the state, a division of powers. So in the United States, there is the central government, there's like the federal government, and then there are the state governments, and actually they have about equal powers. Okay, so the federal government in the United States can't just like be like, hey there, little states, you have to do what I say because I'm the federal government. The states actually can be like, well, you know what, Mr. Federal Government, we're not going to do that because that's our choice to make and not yours. So there's certain powers that the states have, like California and Texas, that actually the federal government doesn't have the right to overrule. Okay, so all of the countries that are in green have something called a federalist system. So they have kind of at least one division of power, if not more. The ones in blue have a different system, okay? So you can see that, yeah, about half the world, maybe not, yeah, about half the world by population has some type of federalist government, okay? So this like division, not all the central powers in the government, but actually there's some power to the states as well, okay? And it's not necessarily like the West is federalist. Like, I mean, you look over here, it's like, a bunch of countries over here, in Europe that are the West that are not federalist. So yeah, it's just a term. All right, so let's read our book now, okay? Understanding the Electoral College. Every 4 years, people throughout the United States vote in the presidential election. This process is known as the popular vote, but technically, people are not voting for the president. Instead, their votes determine which elector will represent their state. There are 538 electors in all. Each state has a certain number of electors. To become president, a candidate must receive 270 electoral votes. Okay, so let's break this down a little bit. Popular vote. Who likes the red pen? Or who likes the blue pen? Who likes the broken red pen? Oh, blue pen wins. Popular vote, 52%. But in the Electoral College, what happens is we have representatives that we've chosen, and they will cast our vote for us. So instead of dealing with, 350 million people's votes, they're just dealing now with 538. A lot easier to count. Am I right? Okay, so this is a picture of the Electoral College, just kind of how it looks. Usually the red represents Republicans, and the blue typically represents Democrats. And then here we have independent parties, third parties, we call them. So they're kind of a different, not Democrat or Republican. But if you look at this, how many colors, aside from these little guys down here, what are the two main colors? What are the big colors on this thing? Can you guys type it in the box? What are the two colors you see? The two colors you see are, right, blue and red. There's only actually two really big parties in the United States. Okay, two major political parties in the United States. There used to be more, actually. Part of the big mess that's happening now is right now the US only has two main parties. The original people who made the country didn't actually think it was going to be just, you either are Republican or you are Democrat. They actually were thinking, these little guys down here, these third parties would have more influence, but they don't. So really right now in the US, we say it's a two-party system. There are other parties, but they just don't have much power. So yeah, that's the Electoral College. We'll talk about how we get those numbers now. Okay. Let's see, I need to hide this so I can read. Okay, in most cases, the candidate who wins a state's popular votes earn all that state's electoral votes. However, Maine and Nebraska are different. In these states, 2 electoral votes go to the candidate who wins the state's popular vote. The other electoral votes go to the person who won the popular vote in each congressional district. Electors take part in a second vote. This happens 1 month after the presidential election. Votes from each state's electors are recorded on a certificate of vote. Certificates from all 50 states and Washington, D.C. are counted in a joint session of Congress. This is when the president is officially selected. The term Electoral College refers to this entire process. This process has been used to choose a president for many years. However, some people believe it is unfair. They suggest using a different method instead. Okay, so the certification of the votes, just an important side note here, the certification of the votes, that's actually happened on January 6th this year. They were starting to do that on January 6th. And that's what people were trying to interrupt. They were trying to interrupt that process of certifying the Electoral College. What is Nebraska? Anonymous question. Good question. Okay, so I'll show you on the next slide here. Okay, I'll come back. Okay, so Nebraska is a state. Here's Nebraska. It's a state. Okay, so Nebraska is a place in America. So Nebraska and Maine, they are a little bit different because they don't give all of their votes to the to one person. They'll actually say, well, okay, so most of the votes went to, the blue side, but we're going to give one to the red side. Or they'll say like most of the votes went to the red side, but some people voted for the blue side, so we're going to give some vote to the blue side. Most states don't do that. In most states, if one state, if like 52% of the people vote for the red person, then all of the votes go to that person. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But yeah, good question. Nebraska is a state. All right. Okay, here we are. All right. So yeah, these numbers, they change too. They're not always 538. If the country gets bigger, then we have more electoral votes. Okay, so this is how some people feel about the Electoral College right now. This guy does not look so happy, right? So what's happened is he went to go do his election and it backfired on him, okay? So a little bit of background, a little bit of history on the Electoral College. It was established in 1787 by the original people who wrote and like established America, okay? It was to make sure, the reason they did this electoral college thing is to make sure that the really small states like Nebraska, like Maine, that the really small states still will be able to have influence and impact politics in America. Okay, so there's some states like New York and California, which are huge. 1 in 8 Americans live in California. Huge state. But just because so many people live in California, does that mean that the other states, that their thoughts and opinions aren't important? Because they're actually doing a lot of hard work too. And so the Electoral College is actually a way to make sure that small states can have a voice in the politics in America. So actually, when they were starting to think like, how do we choose the best leader? Or how do we choose a leader in the most fair way to make sure that we don't have people saying like, my guy won, now I'm going to push you down. But to make people work together and have to try to make the country better and not just be like, I won, so now you have to do what I say, but actually to force people to work together, they actually came up with this idea called the Electoral College. Originally, there was this plan called the Virginia Plan. Virginia is also a state. It's one of the 13 original colonies, okay? So the Virginia Plan said the bigger states, they should be able to determine who is going to be the president of the United States. So they should have more votes than everybody else, okay? But then the New Jersey Plan, because New Jersey was a smaller state, was like, that's not fair. Like, we also fought for this country. We also helped, get America going. We also work hard to serve this country. I think every state should have the same number of votes, even though some are really big and some are really small. Well, that's kind of not fair either now, is it? Okay. So what happened is they actually took the Virginia plan and they took the New Jersey plan and they came up with this. So this is Virginia, the Virginia plan. It says, we want one house and legislature with equal representation, okay? And then the Virginia plan said, well, we want 2 houses, legislative representation based on population. Okay, so this is actually where the idea of federalism comes out. Okay, so now we actually have, go back. Now we actually have these 2 ideas coming together. And so we have representation in the US that is based both on how big your state is, which is the Congress, and on just the fact that you're a member of the United States, which is the Senate. Okay, and so we called that the Great Compromise, the bicameral system. Okay, 2 bi means 2 cameral houses, the 2-house system. So we have both the Congress and the Senate now because of that. Okay, so how does that all tie to the Electoral College? Well, good question. I'm glad you asked. what does all that have to do with the Electoral College? Congress is based on population. So if your state has more people, you're going to have more congressmen. In total, there are 438 congressmen. There are 50 states, but some states are really big, like California, so they have 55 congressmen. Some states are really small, like Nebraska, so they have 5 congressmen. But they all get the same number of senators, okay? So the Senate is another body of leaders, and every state gets 2. Because every state gets 2, it's a fair place for your voice to be heard. And so what happens is Congress and the Senate, they have to work together to get things done. Okay? Sometimes the Congress is controlled by people who like the red pen. And sometimes the Senate is controlled by people who like the blue pen. But they have to work together to get the things they want done. They can't just be like, well, you either do it my way. Oh, wait, not, oh, I still have to work with these other people. And so they actually have to work together and reach compromises, which is good because really life is all about compromise. If we want to get along with one another, frequently we have to say, okay, fine, whatever. We can have taco, we can have arkwai today and ramen, you have to make a compromise. You've learned that if you're in families, right, with brothers and sisters. Okay, so this is a picture of the Electoral College. Okay, so each state, so this is all of the states. I guess this is a little bit old because it says California has 53, but you can see California has quite a few. Texas has the next amount, and then Florida has a good chunk as well. Okay, so the states that are larger, they have more electoral votes, but then other states still have quite a bit as well. Yeah, anyway, moving on. So this is a picture of, oh, actually, I guess this was sorry, this is the picture of the Congress, not the Electoral College. Should have picked up on that because of 53. So yeah, this is the picture of Congress, and then this is a picture of, yeah, all the different congressmen by state. And now this is a picture of the Senate. You can see a lot fewer people, okay? But yeah, every state has 2. All right. Now, we got to be honest here. Like, the idea of the Electoral College, like, helping make sure that, like, the big guy doesn't always overrun the little guy and that they have to work together, that's a really beautiful idea, right? We just want to work together. But in actuality, part of the reason that we have the Electoral College has to do with some really ugly, really bad things. Okay. And part of that is dun, 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 slavery. Okay. So back in 1787, when the US was first founded, women, poor people, so like if you just didn't own land, and non-white people weren't allowed to vote. Okay. So that stinks. In part, okay, so what happened is in the North, there were a lot of people. Okay, in the South, there were also a lot of people, but most of those people were slaves. Okay, and so slaves weren't allowed to vote because slaves were black. They were part of their owner's property. And so what happened is the South, the colonies in the South, they were like, we don't want to be a part of this if we're not going to have a voice in the governance of the country. If we're not going to be able to have a voice in government, like, why should we go with this? So actually, to help get the South to come into the agreements, they reached this idea of the Electoral College, and part of it was based on population. So they said black people, slaves at the time, were only counted as 3/5 of a person. Okay, so the South had a lot of slaves, not a whole lot of like rich white farmers. And so what this did is it gave the South more representation in the electoral system. So they felt like they were represented better in the system. Okay. And yeah, that's pretty horrible to say that somebody's less than a person, just because, yeah, they're black or they're a slave. So yeah, a lot of people really don't like the Electoral College because of this. And honestly, 3/5 a person, that's pretty horrible. So yeah, this is just a picture of, yeah, some of the slaves in the South at the time. And clearly they're people, but in that system, they didn't think so. And yeah, so people still feel like it's part of a big problem. So, all right, we're going to go quickly over some of these next ones so we can get to some questions. So the Electoral College's the Electoral College balances power. So I already talked, if the blue pen's always in control and they don't have to work together with the red pen people, then what will happen is eventually the red pen the red pen will get beaten down by the blue pen. And that's not good. We want to actually try and do some things that work to help bring people together, not just create division. So I'm not going to read all of this next book, okay? Yeah. So, all right. So Electoral College, it is the 538 electors, okay, which are the 435 members of Congress, okay, and then plus the 100 senators, and then you have three people from DC. Okay, so that's how we get that number of 538. Okay, this is actually what the electoral map looks like. And so you can see like the really heavily, the states with a lot of people, they have these really big numbers. Okay, so what will happen normally, if like California, if everybody in California votes for the red pen, then all 55 of these votes will be for red. In Texas, if all 38, if 51% of the people in Texas vote for the blue pen, then all 38 of these votes will go to Texas. Okay, but the only states that are different are Nebraska and Maine. And so what will happen in Nebraska and Maine is they'll actually say like, oh, 51% voted for the blue pen and 49% voted for the red pen. So we're going to give 4 of our votes for the blue pen and 1 vote for the red pen. Okay, so that's how the Electoral College works. So usually what happens is if a state votes to support the blue person, or if a state votes to support the red person, all of those state votes go to that person, okay? So this is just a map of showing you where all the people in America live. So you see where it's like super pointy? You see where it's super pointy? This is where most people live, okay? So people do live in the non-pointy places, but not as many, okay? Yeah, basically, if we look at this map, New York and Chicago and Austin and Los Angeles and Miami, if we did it just based on, where the most popular, where the most populated people, and then based on their vote, like we would have all the big cities always controlling the rural areas. So we would have like the big cities, the heavily populated areas, they would always be in control of the whole country, and the people that were in the less populated places wouldn't have as much of a say. But because of the Electoral College, people have to work together. All right. Yeah, so prevents regional. I want to get to some of the cons here. Okay, so I mentioned this already. It prevents the tyranny of the majority. Can you guys say that word, tyranny? Right? So tyranny is like, oh, the blue pen wins. The blue pen's like, oh, you are so bad, little red pen. I will always control everything. Okay, tyranny means to like terrorize or take over, like to make another person's life miserable, like to bully, right? And so it prevents tyranny. So it keeps the majority from always being able to have their way. It means that people have to work together, right? That's like the big thing. Another pro is that it creates a clear winner, usually, because we base it on the electoral vote, not on the individual popular votes. Okay, so the Electoral College makes it easy to determine who wins an election. In some races, no candidate wins a majority of the popular vote. This happened in the 2000 election. That year, Democratic candidate Al Gore received 50.9 million votes. Republican candidate George W. Bush received 50.4 million votes. Green Party candidate Ralph Nader received 2.9 million votes. No one received more than 50% of the vote. Okay? So this was like, wow, weird. What's going to happen? So what ended up happening, okay, Bush won, okay? He won because of the Electoral College, 271 votes, very close. Okay, Bush won 271 votes. That was enough to win the election, but the popular vote was very close in Florida. Some people did not think Bush should win that state's electoral votes. The Florida Supreme Court ordered a recount of the ballots. Okay, so this is where they took like 20 million or 10 million votes, and they're going through and they're recounting every single one. Okay, as the votes were counted, Bush's lead in the state shrank. The recount dragged on until December 12th. Then the U.S. Supreme Court called for it to end. Bush was given Florida's electoral votes and was declared the winner. Without the Electoral College, a close election might require more extensive recounts. Instead of counting the votes in only one state, people might have to recount the popular votes throughout the entire nation. This process could take much longer. The Electoral College also helps resolve elections in which no candidate wins more than half of the electoral votes. In this situation, the Congress determines who will become president and vice president. The House of Representatives selects the president, that's Congress. Representative votes on 3 candidates who got the most electoral votes. So yeah, imagine recounting 50 million ballots. That would be crazy. That would be so much work. But the Electoral College, if it's just like one state that's really, really close, then they just go and they'll recount that state's votes. Yeah, so that's part of the advantage there. And so yeah, hail to the victors. It makes it clear. All right. Let's talk a little bit about some of the cons here. Okay, one big problem is this thing called faithless electors. This is when electors might not vote as they're expected. So electors are actually chosen by the political parties in the state, okay? So if you have 50 congressmen and half of them are Democrats and half of them are Republican, each party gets to choose 25, okay? So let's read. If the Republican candidate wins a popular vote in a state, the state's Republican electors get the vote. These electors are expected to vote for the Republican candidate. If the Democratic candidate takes a seat, the Democratic electors vote. They are expected to vote for the Democratic candidate. People often act as if these choices are certain, but electors do not always have to vote for their party's candidate. So the electors, they're supposed to vote for the candidate who won, but they don't have to, okay? And this is what we call a faithless elector. An elector who does not vote for a candidate is called a faithless elector. States try to discourage faithless electors. Some states make their electors swear an oath. This is when you're like, I promise that I will vote the way that my party wants me to. But many states do not have consequences, or the consequences are not very severe. Electors sometimes ignore them. For example, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote in Hawaii in 2016. The state's Democratic electors got to vote. In Hawaii, a law requires electors to vote for the candidate who wins a popular vote. But one elector, David Mullenix, voted for Bernie Sanders instead. That's the guy who's like sitting with the mittens at the inauguration. Mullenix was protesting the Electoral College. He did not think it served people well. The Hawaii law does not discuss a penalty for faithless electors. Mullenix was not punished. I see we have a question, so I'm going to ask it. But what if 50% of the votes in the red part and the other 50, then what do they do? Good question, Lisa. So what they would do is they would do a recount of all the ballots. And if after doing the recount, if everything is still tied, then it would probably go to the state legislature is my guess. I know that at the federal level, when there's a tie, because that has happened before, there has been a tie in the Electoral College. That actually they goes through the Congress and the Senate, and the Senate and yeah, so the Congress votes and it all, yeah, they have a process for that. But I think probably, Lisa, the answer to that question is it would probably be in the state legislature. They'd probably yeah, figure out how to count that and break the tie. Good question. This is a faceless elector. Haha. Right? So this guy was supposed to vote orange, but he was like, no, I'm going to vote for yellow. Haha. Devil. All right. So faithless electors. In Minnesota, electors must swear to vote for their party's candidate. Mohammed Abdurrahman broke his pledge in 2016. Clinton won the popular vote in Minnesota, but Abdurrahman voted for Sanders instead. Bernie Sanders, you naughty boy. Minnesota's Secretary of State rejected the vote. He replaced Abdurrahman with an alternate elector who voted for Clinton. In 2016, 4 Washington electors also chose not to vote for Clinton. A Washington law fines faceless electors. The electors had to pay $1,000. Oh no, $1,000. Not a big deal. This was the first time in the law's 30-year history that an elector was fined. Several elections throughout the U.S. history have included faithless electors. So far, electors have never swayed the result of an election. In each case, the same candidate would have won even if all the electors had voted as expected. Still, critics of the electoral process worry that one day that may change. If many electors do not vote as expected, it could be difficult to predict which candidate could win the election. So actually, this was what, again, on January 6th, what people were trying to interrupt. That's what all the like crazy protests and rioting in Washington, D.C. was. They were trying to interrupt this process. Okay, so what happens if there's a contested election? This is when it's not clear. This actually ties into Lisa's question a little bit. Okay, so this is a con. Okay. Some electoral college gives more sorry, I need to look at the time real quick. I don't want to go too long. I know you guys have stuff to do. All right, con. The Electoral College gives some voters more power. Okay, so if you think about this, just with the way that it's set up, there's some states, like the smaller states, actually have more voice and more power than they would in a normal vote. Okay, so because of the Electoral College, some people's votes influences the election's results more than others. Specifically, people in large states have less of an influence than people in small states. For example, 39.25 million people live in California. This state has 55 electoral votes. That means California has 1 electoral vote for every 714,000 people. Okay, but check this out. In Wyoming, okay, only 590,000 people live in Wyoming, but the state has 3 electoral votes. So that means for every 195 people in Wyoming, they have 1 electoral vote. So actually, your vote counts heavier in Wyoming than it does in California. Okay, that can be kind of discouraging, right? If you live in a big city. The vote for one person in Wyoming, or the vote of one person in Wyoming will affect the election results more than the vote of a person from California. Critics of the Electoral College say that this is not fair. Presidential candidates know that votes in some states are more influential. They will pay more attention to these voters. Okay, so there's certain random little states like Ohio, Florida. There's certain states that they have they have more influence on the election, and so they get more attention from the presidential candidates. They're like, hey, I'm the best guy in the world, you really want to vote for me? And they're like, okay, yeah, we'll vote for you. All right, so the certain states get a lot more attention because yeah, of the electoral college. The Electoral College also affects how candidates campaign. States such as California, Texas, New York, and Illinois have large populations. Therefore, they should also have significant influence in the election. But voters in these states typically vote for one political party. For example, Texas electoral votes went to the Republican candidate in all 10 elections from 1980 to 2016. California's vote went to the Democratic candidate in the 7 elections from 1992 to 2016. Candidates often assume they will win the electoral votes of a state that tends to support their political party. They do not campaign as much in these states. So California usually always goes Democratic. So if you're Hillary Clinton, you're not going to spend a lot of time going to California because you know they're going to vote for you anyway. If you're, Donald Trump, you're not going to go to California because they're not going to vote for you, right? So you're not going to bother going to Texas either because you know that Texas is going to vote for you. So what you're going to do is you're going to go to the states where it's more contested, where it's more close, okay? Oh, another question. What is Tea Party? Okay. Jerry Shaw, excellent question. Tea Party is actually a third-party candidate. They tend to be really, really far right. They also tend to be low taxes. So the Tea Party is actually got its name from the Boston Tea Party, which was a event in U.S. history where a bunch of angry colonists went and they got on board a boat and they took all the tea off the boat because the tea was getting really heavily taxed, and they threw it into the ocean because they're like, we don't want to drink your tea, we'll drink coffee instead. And so that actually made the British colony or the British government really upset, and it helped start the Revolutionary War. So the Tea Party is actually against high taxes, and they're actually they're further right than the Republicans. Okay. Yeah, Cha Huawei. Yeah, Tea Party is it's just a political party in the US. Okay, good question. All right. Let's see. Okay. Let's talk about one more con here and then we'll wrap it up and we'll ask some questions. So one of the big problems right now is the Electoral College actually does not represent the people. So like if someone who is in Wyoming, if their vote counts more than someone in California, like that's not fair. So yeah, let's read. In some cases, a candidate wins a popular vote but loses the Electoral College. So the people chose one candidate, but the other guy won. Okay. In 2000 election, Al Gore led the popular vote by more than 500,000 votes. However, George Bush won the electoral vote. Even though more people had voted for Gore, Bush became president. Right? So how fair is that? Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by an even larger margin, by an even larger amount in 2016. In fact, she had the third highest total of any candidate in history. But Clinton received nearly 3 million more votes than Donald Trump, but she received only 227 electoral votes. Trump won the election with 304 electoral votes. Once again, the person who became president was not the person who most voters supported. So this can happen with the Electoral College. More people voted for the blue pen, but people in the right state voted in the right way, and the president was sneaky, and the president who was running knew which states to campaign in that had that weird balance of electoral votes, and this guy won. So that's happened a few times. Yeah, actually past 2 elections, not the current one, but before that. So yeah, There are some problems with it. Yeah, okay, so this is pros and summaries in a nutshell, or pros and cons in a nutshell. So pros, the good things: the Electoral College motivates. It makes the federal government consider the interests of the states. So the federal government can't just be like, do what I say or I'm gonna crush you like a bug, because the states have power. The Electoral College gives state proportional power. So you can't just have one big state telling, hey, everybody, I'm California, this is how it's going to be. Like, they have to work together. The Electoral College prevents one region of the country from controlling the election. Okay. Yeah, it can flip on different, the election can change on different states. The Electoral College makes sure rural areas are not ignored. So rural just means like small, low populated areas. So that means, yeah, people living in the countryside still have an important part to play in the country. The Electoral College creates a clear winner. Yep. And the Electoral College makes it easy to predict election results and transition between administrations. Normally, we won't count this last election. All right, cons. So the bad things. Boo. Some electors do not vote for their party's candidate. So faceless electors are a big problem. They throw the whole thing into a tizzy. The Electoral College makes some people's votes worth more than others. So it's not perfectly fair. Like, you know, why should my vote count more just because I live in the middle of nowhere and your vote count less because you live in Los Angeles? The Electoral College causes politicians to focus on battleground states and ignore voters in other areas. So California and Texas, they're not going to get much attention, but like these little random states in the middle, like Nebraska, like they actually get a lot of attention. The candidate who becomes president may not be the candidate that most people supported. So more people voted for Al Gore, but he didn't win. And then the Electoral College does not adequately represent minority voters. So I didn't get a chance to talk with you about this too much. There's this thing that's done where how they draw voting districts. It can, yeah, oftentimes minority and Black neighborhoods get drawn in such a way that their votes get split and they don't count as loud as they should. And then the Electoral College can make people feel like their votes do not count, and that discourages people from participating in democracy, which is really sad and not good, because in democracy, we need to have participation. Speaking of which, it's your turn to participate, my little students. Anyone got any questions? You guys asked some good ones. Bravo. Any more questions?
Hi.
What's up?
My question is, like, if all the people like the red, and it will like do it will it will like
what will happen?
What it will happen?
Okay, so the red and the blue, I'm just using these as two different people, two different candidates. So if more people vote for red, then red wins. But red still has to be nice to blue because blue still has a lot of power. Okay, so yeah, the Electoral College means that even if the red guy wins, he still has to think of what Mr. Blue wants. And if the blue guy wins, he still has to think of what Mr. Red wants.
My question just is like, if all the people like the red, or all the people like blue, and no one likes red, and what did happen?
Oh, that's a good question. So what happens if 100% of the people say that they like the red guy? Then he will win and we say he will win by landslide. And if that happens, then that means that probably one party will be very, very strong, and it will take a long, 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 long time for the other party to come to power. Because if 100% of the people vote for the red guy, then that means that the red guy, he's going to have a lot of power, and that party will be in power for a long time. But if they don't do a good job, guess who's going to come back? If they don't do a good job, eventually they can choose to vote for the blue guy.
Okay.
Yeah, good question, Jerry.
Thank you for that.
Good job. Thank you for the question. Any other questions?
Hello.
Hi, Tony.
My question is just some people have higher votes than others, but they do not get to being president, right?
Yes, sometimes.
But how come they does not being presidents?
So we have the popular vote. I'll show you a map here. We have the popular vote, which is like 50% of the people vote for, 51% of the people vote for somebody that they like, and then 49 vote for the other guy. Well, because of the Electoral College, okay, so let me see. Okay, here we are. There's the map. Okay, so because of this, let's say all of California votes for Hillary Clinton. All of New York votes for Hillary Clinton. Okay, so if Hillary Clinton gets all of California, all of New York, all of these states here, maybe in these 6 states, maybe there are 150 million people, maybe 51% of the country. But then the other places, okay, so most of the people live in these places, okay? Do you see that? Most of the people live here and there, okay? But we still have a lot, but if you look, we still have a lot of votes in the middle of the country, right?
Yeah.
And so usually the big cities, they tend to vote Democratic. They tend to vote blue. And because of that, usually you have a higher percentage of people voting for the Democrats. But in the middle of the country, more people tend to be Republican. They tend to be red. And so maybe there's 51% of the people in the cities, but 49% of the people in the middle of the country. And then sometimes it works out that the electoral vote, the number of votes by the state, actually is bigger than the number of the popular votes.
Oh, okay.
Good question, Tony. Hey guys, I gotta get going here. I have another class, but it was really good to talk, and I really enjoyed your questions. If you have more questions, yeah, you can ask the Ivy admin, and I'll get back to you in WeCom. Okay? So thanks, guys.